One of the things that we want to just keep in mind as we get ready to start our study, we are going into a new book, and it's kind of, I guess you'd say ironic, but I would just say that's just the way the Lord usually works. We're going into a book that's highlighted for the plagues. The book of Genesis, the book of Exodus is more known for the plagues that we read about. They go upon a nation because the nation refuses to do the things that God has asked them to do. When we look at this book of Exodus, we're going to see that, number one, it doesn't start anything and nothing's going to finish in it either. It's a book of just continuation. It's continuing what we started in Genesis, and Exodus is going to finish up what nothing concluded. We're still going to be in the wilderness. We're still going to be dealing with people that are fighting and disagreeing with the things that God is trying to establish. This book is not going to bring us to any conclusion, but it's part of the journey. And I think one of the things that we will find familiar is that Exodus will show us the ups and downs of the journey. They're not going to get to the promised land in this book, although you're going to hear about it. It's going to open up with some information, and somebody's playing music. I'm going to...
No, my phone went... Sorry.
No problem. And so what we'll see is that the beginnings of the book will show a connection. And then we're going to see this land of Egypt to be discovered for what it actually is. And that is difficulty in trying to bring a God concept in a land that has its own gods. Egypt will be highlighted for its... you will see the gods that are the, I guess I'm trying to say, the worshiping gods that the Egyptians have will all be attacked. So all of the various things that you see the plagues hitting will be hitting the idols and the nation's worship center points. But we'll point all that out as we get to it. So what we're going to do now is just go ahead, and I'm hoping that everybody can still hear. And when I start playing start playing the audio, I'm hoping that you hear it clearly. But we're going to start with the opening chapter, and we're going to go right to chapter 1 of Exodus. Let's take a listen. But before I go, any questions?
No.
All right, here we go.
Chapter 1. Now these are the names of the children of Israel which came into Egypt. Every man and his household came with Jacob: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful, and increased abundantly, and multiplied, and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people,
Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also into our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land.
Therefore did they set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their words. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, in water, and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other Puah. he said,
When ye do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live.
But the midwives feared God, and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. And the king of Egypt called for the midwives, and said unto them,
Why have ye done this thing, and have saved the men children alive?
And the midwives said unto Pharaoh,
Because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered ere the midwives come in unto them.
Therefore God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying,
Every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive.
All right. So there we go with this opening portion here, and as you can see, as I had stated, that this book picks up right where Genesis left off. And it says, and now these are the names of the generations, and it starts naming all of the children of Israel, and we see those names as Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Zebulun, so forth and so on. We talked about each of those names and those tribes. And if you remember in the last study, we kind of looked at these names and these tribes and some of the tendencies that, I see Mother Peterson's joining. So we see some of these tendencies that we have with these tribes. And I find it interesting that you'll see that going forward and going through in the remainder of this book, and even when you get into the Old Testament, in the New Testament, you'll still see these tribes, and you'll see certain tribes that will have tendencies that associate to the description that we talked about in our last study, with some of the tendencies they'll have. So you'll see Benjamin being just like how they were prophesied to be, and so forth and so on. All right, so in looking at this, I think the most important thing is when we get down to verse 5. And it says, and all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, and Joseph was in Egypt already. All right, so we recognize once again where we are. We're in Egypt. Then the next verse, it says, and Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all his generation. And I think we have to pause there and just kind of stop for a moment and understand what that's trying to let us know. That we can set forth a lot of different things of how we think and how we believe and what we want to accept as what our society holds as true and what our society holds as right. But all those situations, at some point, the founders of it, the people that believe in it, will die. The scripture tells us that it's appointed on the man what? Once to die. So we're all going to end up in that state. And that's the reality of it. We need to understand that, yes, we are born in this world. We're born in sin. We're born incomplete. But our goal is that we should find a way to agree with the things that God says. Whether we accept them as part of our everyday life or not, you have to agree that it's right. Because if you're trying to go down south, and the first thing you gotta agree to is where is south, what direction south is. Because you can do a lot of traveling, you can do a lot of movement, and you can say, well, I'm making good time. I'm traveling faster than others. I'm going at a good speed. But if you haven't agreed to what the direction is, then you're doing a lot of action, but you're not getting to where you need to be. Does that make sense to you guys? You understand what I'm saying by that?
Yes. Yes.
And so, Mother Peterson, I just want to say hi. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
That's good. Glad to see you were able to join.
Thank you. I'm glad I was able to also.
All
Blessing.
right. And so we're on Exodus chapter 1, and right now we're on verse 6.
Thank you.
And so it's important for us to recognize that philosophies, ideas, I see Regina is joining. Philosophy and ideas and tendencies come and they go. And I think that's something that we should always keep in mind, and that is that what you want to look for is something that doesn't die. That's an important aspect. If you are focusing on things that our society, and in this case Egypt, the things that they held to, you're going to see a lot of things that Egypt believes in, and a lot of the things that they are accepting as right and true. Hi Regina, how you doing?
Hi, Wayne. How are you?
I'm good. We got everybody pretty much on, so we're glad to have you. We're in Exodus, and we're on chapter 1, verse 6.
Okay.
All right. And so hanging on to things that are generational, cultural, national norms, that's okay. But what do you really want? You really want to be able to find things that are eternally true. And where do you find those things from?
Scripture.
You find those things from Scripture. You find them from God. All the ideals and all the philosophies that Joseph had, all the philosophies and ideals that his brothers had, that whole generation went away. And so now this new generation can set up what they want to set up. Now, whether they set up something that's good, whether they set up something that's right, and what we're going to see is they're going to go a different way. That whole generation is going to go a different way than the generation that Joseph was part of. And I think that's important that we recognize that even as we get older and we have children, or we're around children and we're teaching that next generation, that we want to try to, yes, let them know how our world works currently. But we also want to be able to try to make sure that we are giving people things that will last eternally. And that's the key. And that's what the Word of God does. It gives us things that last eternally. All right? And so in verse 7 it says, "And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them." All right, so what is that saying? In the midst of Egypt, God's people what? Were able to flourish. In the midst of Egypt, God's people were able to be strong and to be mighty, even as they went from one generation to the next. Why? Because they were passing down what was given to them. Abraham passed down what he had to Isaac. Isaac passed down what he had to Jacob. And Jacob passed down what he had to his children. All right? And I see somebody else joining here. And then his children passed that down to that next generation. And what it did, by following those things of God, it allowed them to do great, to be mighty, even in a land that is typified as a land that will hold on to things that do not initially start with God. And that's the land of Egypt. All right. So if we look now at verse 8, it says, "Now there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph." And that's a good point there to kind of pause and to think about. Because basically what that's saying, if it knew not Joseph, so then what are the things that Joseph knew? It didn't know the things that Joseph knew. It didn't hold on to the vision and to the ideals that Joseph had. So what are the things that Joseph had? What was passed down to Joseph? The same thing that he got from Isaac. And Isaac passed down the things that he got from Abraham. And Abraham got those things from God. Yes. And then we know that God spoke directly to Abraham, but God also spoke directly to Isaac. And he also spoke directly to Jacob. And now, if you look closely at the scripture, when we went through Genesis about Joseph, Joseph never got any direct revelation. Remember, God came directly to Abraham. He came directly to Isaac. He came directly to Jacob. But he didn't come directly to Joseph. Joseph just lived off the principles that were passed down to him from one generation to the next. But now we've got this new generation. And this new generation of the children of Israel were following the same principles. But the new generation of Egypt didn't know Joseph, didn't know Joseph's principles, and did not know Joseph's God. So now they're looking, because they're not trusting in God. And so this new Egypt doesn't remember that it was Joseph's God that helped provide during the famine, that kept Egypt in power, that kept Egypt strong. This new Egypt doesn't remember and doesn't hold on to the truth that it was Joseph's God that paved the way for it to be sustained during the 7 years of famine and to build up during the 7 years of plenty. So when you see this, you see now this new Egypt, this new king, this new Pharaoh has a whole different philosophy. And that speaks to our world even today. I mean, eternal truth is truth. Whether you agree with me or you agree with the Bible or you agree with God, it doesn't change what truth is.
That's right. Amen.
So you can say all day that
I believe,
you know, I believe, I don't believe in gravity. I don't believe, I don't think it should work, and I don't believe. But if you step off the steps or you step off the building, gravity will work on you regardless. That's what you think, because it's true. But there's even a greater truth than the natural truth, and that's the truth of God. No matter who says it, or how they say it, or how much they believe in it, and you can believe in it with all your heart, it doesn't change it. And that's the problem that this new king has. And so we're going to take a look at this king. Let's go a little further. It says, now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. So, first thing he's noticing is that he's running into a situation where the people that believe in the values of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are being what? Blessed.
Blessed.
That's right.
And they are growing, and they're being able to be sustained and to do well. And he's also recognizing that it's the same as not happening to them. He's starting to see the disconnect. And instead of being part of what was passed down, they are focusing on being separate. And on focusing on being separate, they disconnect themselves from that which blessed them. All right? So then we look at verse 8. I'm sorry, verse 9. Before I go further, any questions? Any comments? All right?
No.
Let's look at verse 9. It says, and he said to his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Now look at verse 10. Come on and let us deal what? Wisely with them.
Wisely.
All right. So now, when you say dealing wisely, it's not they're trying to increase intelligence. They're not putting together an education program. That ain't the kind of wisely that we're talking about. The kind of wisely that we're talking about here is that they're trying to figure out ways that they can hinder the people that are following the ways of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and increase their ways when they don't want to, because they are a new generation and they don't know the things that Joseph knows. They don't agree with the things that Joseph has passed down. They've forgotten that it was Joseph's wisdom that helped keep Egypt out of the problem during the famine. So he says, let's deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass when they fall out any war, they join also with our enemies. So now what has creeped in? Fear. And so a lot of times when you don't agree with something, fear comes in. And and usually with fear, what do people do when they're afraid? They start fighting. You think so? Look at the lines that you see folks fighting over toilet tissue. They're fighting over hand sanitizer. And I don't understand it. I mean, how much toilet tissue do you need? I mean, I don't understand it. I mean, but maybe somebody can explain it to me. But this is exactly what this new leadership in Egypt is going to do. We got to get clever, and see, and doing it wisely means we're not going to just go out and kill them, because we need them. We need them to do what? To do work.
Work for us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we got to make them feel like they're working, but we're not going to give them everything they need to have, and we're not going to help them as much as we probably could, and we're going to try to take more from them than we get. Does that sound familiar?
Slavery.
Yes, it does.
Okay. So this is the wise counsel that they have. When you turn away from the things of Joseph, that means that you are removing yourself from Joseph's God. Does somebody have a question? Okay. When you're removing yourself from Joseph's God, the scripture said that a fool has said in his heart, what? There is
no God.
All right.
Fool.
So in his attempt to deal wisely, he's really becoming very stupid in his actions. All right. Verse 11. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters. So we're going to set people over you to watch you. We're going to keep an eye on you. Aren't you glad we don't have a lot of surveillance going on today, right?
We do.
All right, but that's what's happening, right? So we're going to keep an eye on you. We're going to set some taskmasters over you. And the taskmasters to afflict them with burdens. So we're going to put burdens on you. We're going to tax you. We're going to, make things difficult. We're not going to make it easy. And they put and built for Pharaoh treasuries. Well, when you put the burdens on people, where are you going to put all the money? In the treasury. So they built treasuries in the cities of Pithom and Ramesses. All right. So what we're seeing now is this change, this shift. There's a new day in Egypt. Well, there's a new day in this world today, isn't it?
Amen.
We're dealing with things that we've never really dealt with, So in this new day, they decided that we're going to put burdens on them. We're going to deal wisely or crafty, or we're going to be deceitful or cunning, all right, with them. All right, look at verse 12. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. Now look at that. So sometimes you ever ask yourself, why do I have to deal with difficulty? Why do I have to deal with suffering? What is it about problems and everyday burdens that we end up with that become like, just annoying situations? Why do we have to have it? And usually when we have them, we're praying for God to do what? Remove
Change it.
We want God to change it. We want to get rid of that. And yet sometimes I think if we were to really think deeply on it and try to understand that God uses these difficulties to grow us, we end up growing not only in just number, but in just understanding, in relationship. Our ability to know God, it just becomes so much more important that having all things happen the way we want it to happen allows us to be distant. We don't need God as much because we just figure, why do I pray to God? Everything's going to work out just wonderful. I don't have no issues. But when you have issues and they come up, you end up finding that your connection to God gets what? It gets solid. Exactly. It gets tighter. You hold on to Him. You want to hang on to God because you need to lean on somebody. And sometimes you can't lean on one another. You can't even stand up on your own 2 feet. And we end up just leaning on God. And we do that because, number one, we don't know. We don't have all the answers. We don't know a lot of times truth from error. So then we have to lean on somebody that does. And that's who? That's God. All right. So it says they multiplied and they grew and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. So now, sometimes you think everybody's happy when you're doing well. Well, Egypt was not happy when the children of Israel were doing well. You know, I have a picture that I have on my computer, and I'm gonna try to describe it to you. And it's a picture of this really, really big ditch that this guy is in. He's in a deep ditch, about 20 feet deep, right? And there's another guy who comes around and he lays down on the edge of the ditch and he reaches his hand down to try to grab him. But he knows he can't grab him because the guy's 20 feet down. His arms are not 20 feet long, but he's reaching down and struggling to try to grab his hands. And it looks like he's trying to help him, right? But when you pan away from the picture a little further, what you'll see is a 30-foot ladder sitting right by him. He's not going to give the guy the ladder. He's going to give the guy the false hope that I'm trying to help you by reaching his hand down there. But if he really wanted to help him, he would stop reaching his hand and he would just go get the ladder, right? But the guy in the ditch doesn't realize that there's a ladder up there. And he just believes it. Well, this guy is really trying to help me. He's doing everything he can, you know, and I appreciate his help. When if he could really see the whole picture, he would see that there's a ladder there and the guy's not trying to help. Somebody had a question?
Yeah, it's just the thought that counts, they say. So there you go.
That's right. That's right. So you think somebody's helping you, and if you understood their entire resources, you realize this guy, all he needed to do was to put the ladder down here, and I would have got out the ditch. Well, that's dealing wisely. That's giving false hope. That's making people think a certain way. All right, our call just ended, so we got to connect again. So let me. Just before the drop, we were on 12, and so 13, and it says, "And the Egyptians made the children of Israel serve with rigor." And that is kind of a situation where you recognize now they're kind of pulling off the gloves. They are basically saying, we're going to treat you bad, and we don't care if you know it. We're not really trying to, deal so wisely with you now. Now we're going to do things so we are not on your side. We don't believe in your God. We don't believe in your principles. We don't believe in your Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob stuff. We don't care nothing about what Joseph did years ago. That was years ago. We don't care about any of that. We're going to start now treating you with rigor. And it says, and they made their lives bitter and hard and bondage. You see that? Now they're at the point where they are showing the true selves. Okay, I see Mother Peterson coming back. All right, welcome back, Mother Peterson. And so they're showing their true selves, and they're beginning to recognize that it's best for them to just treat people the way they want to treat them, and this way is just, we don't care about you guys. We don't like you. We need you here because we want you to do all the stuff we don't want to do, but we're not going to be nice to you. So in verse 14 it says, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in bricks. All right, so they got them doing all the building and in all the manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. So we're going to make you serve. We're going to make you subservient to us. You serving us. You're here to take care of our bidding. And when we do it, we're not going to do it with any respect. We're not respecting you guys at all. We're treating you as subservient to us. And that's a mindset. We got certain people in our world that think that I'm better than you. Certain class of people think they're just better than other people. Sometimes when people can change like that. Sometimes people, when they get a position or they get money or they get power, all of a sudden they're better than you, and you have to watch that. And that's a thing that can sneak up on you sometimes. You have to make sure that you don't allow that to happen to yourself. All right, verse 15. And the king of Egypt spake unto the Hebrew midwives, which were the name by one Sipharin, and the name of the other was Pur. Now he's going to these midwives. These are basically the people that will watch over the and help the women that were given birth. All right, and what does he want to talk to them about? And so this is what he says in verse 16. And he said, when you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women. Now, to which women? The Hebrew women. So that's not to all, not to the Egyptians. We're only going to do this to the Hebrew women, the people that follow the teachings of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And see them upon the stool. So when they're on that birthing stool, getting ready to give birth, if it be a son, then ye shall what? Kill him. See, this is what rigor means. That we're not trying to pretend anymore. We don't want you guys doing well. And so the first thing we're going to do to make sure that you don't do well is we want to destroy the male side of the population. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Amen.
All right. So if we can get the male side of the population to have all kinds of problems and all kinds of issues, mainly what our goal is to kill them. We don't want the males to prosper. We don't want them to grow. We don't want them to have any. We want the males to be put to death. But if it be a daughter, you shall allow it to live. And so we want women to grow up without any men or any male role models.
Or protection.
Or protection, exactly.
That's what it is, so that they can have their way with the women.
Exactly.
Oh.
All right.
What is that with the women?
Verse 17. But the midwives feared God. Now look at that. So now they had situations where.
Oh. Mary says she got disconnected.
Yeah, just tell her to reconnect.
Okay.
Right. I had to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the only downside that we have with this this little free thing here. What's nice about it is you have a lot of control, on different things, and you can get to see everybody. But I have to see what it costs. This is not bad, and if it's not that much, I might bump it up to the next level, and then we won't have the interruptions. But I just wanted to see how it works, and it actually works pretty good. We used this at my job for a while, and it wasn't too bad. All right. So, verse 17. But the midwives feared God and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. So what they ended up doing was like, well, you know what? They had to make a decision, and in that decision, can y'all all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. In that decision, they had to make a decision. Am I going to serve God, or am I going to do what these Egyptian leaders, these national leaders, asked me to do? And that's something that a lot of times that we have to do. We got to make decisions. I know what I've been told, but am I going to do what's right? I know what people are trying to say, but am I going to go by what I know, the teachings that I have from that which was passed down from me, from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and was early on in the nation during the time of Joseph. All right, and so they decided they're not going to do it. All right, and so in verse 18, and the king of Egypt called the midwives and said unto them, why have ye done this thing, and have saved the men children alive? And so the midwives say something, and sometimes people, I would look at commentators and they go, well, did these midwives tell a lie, or did they fabricate something here, or what? And I wasn't there, so I don't know exactly how it happened, but when you look at the scripture, when you look at the way it's written here, it's like they're saying, God worked it out. Before we got there, they were having their children. So look at what he says, what they say. And the midwife said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively, and they deliver ere the midwives come into them. So they're saying, before we even get there, they don't have their baby. Yes.
I just want to bring out a point that during slavery time, the women would have their babies in the field without midwives and helping one another. So that could be a point of what they're trying to disclose, is that these women are just going to have, they're just having their babies, not even calling on the midwives, as or they are slow to get to them or whatever.
Exactly. And so what you will have is, sometimes people recognize, well, you know what? Let's not call the midwives. Let's not call and ask them for the assistance.
God.
We'll figure out how to do it ourselves without calling in the so-called medical professionals. And so when you look at that in verse 20, it says, and therefore God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mightily. So now, when they were trying to deal wisely with them and kind of be subtle, having the ladder outside that can really help, pretending they're trying to help by reaching in, and they still were not trying to help, but God still blessed them, right? Then they decide, well, we're going to treat them bad. We're going to treat them with rigor. We're going to just, we're going to take the mask off. We're going to stop pretending. We're going to let them see that we got the ladder, and we're still not going to give it to you. That they went through all this problems, and yet we see here in verse 20 that they still multiplied and they still got stronger. So once again, we start identifying ourselves with the difficulties that we have, with things that actually can make us stronger. So when we look at what's going on in the land, and we begin to watch people go through their worry and their fear and all of their concern, we can begin to recognize that this is something that can actually make us stronger and turn us into a situation where we can come out of this with even greater sense of power. I think it's important that we have that kind of a situation, that kind of mindset that yes, it may be difficult. Yes, it may be a problem. And yes, it's a struggle. But is this something that when it's all said and done, I'm going to come out of this stronger? And sometimes it's hard to see that. Sometimes it's hard to understand that. And sometimes it's hard to believe it. But yet we got to understand that that's more than likely what's going to happen. You're going to come out of your difficult situation stronger than when you went into it. All right? Any comments or questions on that? All right. So if we look at this last verse here, and it says, and Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born, ye shall cast it into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. Now, their philosophy now is, I'm going to get around this whole thing about, well, you got there too late, the child was already born. We're going to get over that. We're going to go straight to just murder. We dealt with rigor. We tried to do it, kind of handle it really quick. Now we're just going to go from house to house, and if we see a newborn male child, you know what we're going to do? We're going to throw it in the river. All right. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this is the river is one of the things that the Egyptians worship. So it's like they're going to say, we're going to take that child, we're going to take your male children, and we're going to offer it up to our God. We're going to give it to our God. And our God is that Nile River, because they looked at the Nile River as something, as a source for things for them to sustain themselves. And I think that's one of the reasons why initially when we get into the Lord getting the children out of Egypt, you're gonna see the Nile River go through some changes. All right. Now, I found on this that I had a nice little trigger where I can mute all, so that takes care of the background. So when I ask for questions, I unmute everybody. So anybody got anything to add to this this whole philosophy of Egypt and Pharaoh having changed, switched over, going wisely, and then with rigor, and then to just plain out murder?
Well, we see that. We see to.
Go ahead, Hayward.
We see today that there's nothing new under the sun, like the Bible say, and we see that people are still doing the same thing today. They're killing, they're conniving, they're trying to be, want to keep the people of God oppressed, and they're doing it today. Same thing.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Yeah, well, it's funny because he's still going through his thing with, the Allah thing and stuff. I didn't get into none of that, so, he was telling me about this coronavirus and all that, and he asked me, was I worried? I said, no, I'm not worried about it. So he says, well, I said, well, if God wants me to have the virus, I'm going to have the virus. It's just that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Since, like I said, since I had this stroke, I don't let nothing bother me. I mean, listen, God gave me the stroke. I'm battling through it. I feel good. I'm happy every day. Like I keep telling people, there's nothing that can go wrong in my life. It hasn't this far. I lived 62 years. People say I'd never be 21. That's 41 years ago. What do I have to worry about?
Right.
That's how I look at it. I just look at it. Whatever's going to happen in my life, if it's meant to happen, it's going to happen. If it's not meant to happen, it's not going to happen.
Right.
So I don't worry about it. I just got to the point I'm not going to let nothing stress me out.
Right.
So.
Well, that's good.
That's what I was telling him. I said, man, listen, I ain't got time to worry about other stuff. Just like he was saying, he said, well, you can't go to church. I said, no, but I can read my Bible. I hung up with him and dad missed Pentecost.
Yeah.
That things work, so what am I worried about?
That's right. That's right.
So, like I told him, I said, I leave it all in God's hands. He said, well, what are you doing in the morning? I said, I wake up, I say, thank you. He says, for what? I said, it's because you woke me up.
Excellent.
So, yeah, that's smart. I said, no, it's human.
Did Gabe and them get back in?
Yeah. Can you guys are able to hear Wayne?
Yes.
All right. Good.
Yeah, you can hear that loud guy.
All right. So, we thank God for that. I'm looking at our we do have a few minutes left, but I'm not going to try to get into chapter 2 because I would not get out of that. But I want to thank you guys for joining us and allowing us to do this format. And we're going to try to continue it. I may look into doing something to avoid that little break that we have to have in the next session, but I'll let you know.